Simon Brown sat at his office desk, his arms cradling his head. It felt as though the day would never end. He had devoted 20 years of his life to his beloved profession. Being a surgeon was his life's calling. From his teen years he dreamed of saving lives. So without hesitation, he chose to attend medical school after graduating from high school. The entrance exams were not challenging for Simon, as he was a good student and excelled in natural sciences. Studying at the medical school was fascinating. With an unusual fervour, he studied Latin, which many students found daunting. Anatomy came intuitively to him. During his first practical session, he didn't faint at the sight of blood, but instead attentively memorized everything his mentors taught him. The dean held Simon in high regard, predicting a bright future for him. Few students demonstrated such commitment to the medical profession. For Simon, being a doctor was not merely a job, but his true calling. After his internship, Simon Brown was assigned to the regional hospital. From the outset, Simon demonstrated his readiness to uphold the title of doctor. As he gained experience, Simon sharpened his skills, showing himself to have a true talent for surgery. The head doctor quickly recognized his potential. His colleagues were openly envious. Not yet 30, Simon was already performing complex operations. This divided the hospital staff. Some admired Dr. Brown and aspired to emulate him, while others harboured resentment, suspecting favouritism or sheer luck at play. Nevertheless, Simon continued to achieve one success after another, unconcerned with others' opinions. The value of human life was his sole concern. His career thrived. Over 20 years, he saved several thousand lives. Working tirelessly, often foregoing weekends and vacations, he put himself last. Family life was never a priority for him. Brown had women in his life, but he couldn't establish a family with any of them, as they couldn't adapt to his lifestyle. Work was always his priority. And now, after so many years, his reputation came under scrutiny when a patient died on his operating table, a first in his long practice. Everyone understood that a medical error was unlikely, as Dr. Brown's skills were unquestionable. The patient was in a critical condition when brought in. Survival was poor. The doctors deemed his death a likely outcome. Despite Dr. Brown's brilliance as a surgeon, he couldn't perform the miracle needed to save the man. After the failed operation, he simply went to his office and locked himself inside. He didn't want to see anyone. The relatives of the deceased were not yet in the hospital, so it was still up to him to inform them of the tragedy. Simon didn't even know how to begin. Typically, he was greeted by joyous faces, a testament to his victories against death. This expression of boundless happiness gave him strength. He, an ordinary man, had fought death and won. But now, everything was different. There was a knock at the office. So engrossed was Simon that he didn't immediately react. The knock came again. Reluctantly, Dr. Brown rose from his desk and walked towards the door. There stood the head doctor, a commanding woman in her 40s. Everyone feared Jessica Fail. Everyone except Simon. She had once been his great love. Back then she wasn't the first lady of the hospital. She arrived when Dr. Brown was already basking in glory. The determined and serious young woman immediately caught the surgeon's attention. He fell in love at first sight, though he always denied such a possibility. Surprisingly, Jessica responded to his advances, and soon they were in a passionate relationship. But even she could not accept the fact that Simon would always put his work above her. After 4 years together, Jessica and Simon parted ways. Neither held a grudge. They both understood that such sacrifices are inevitable in their profession. Simon Brown always saw Jessica as a loyal friend. Even after she became the chief physician, she maintained her affection for her former lover. However, her current expression was anything but friendly. "Simon, "We need to talk," she said, avoiding his gaze. "Jessica, I can't talk right now. My patient died. I could have saved him, but I failed." Dr. Brown's voice shook as if he was on the brink of tears. "Calm down," she snapped. "Nothing can change what happened. You know very well that it was too late to save him. It's not your fault. What's the point of blaming yourself now?" Jessica locked the office door and sat down on the sofa. Simon joined her, sinking heavily into the cushion. "I know," he sighed, "but I can't help it. This is the first time this has happened in my entire career. I'll keep blaming myself. There's nothing I can do about it." "Simon, that's not right," she said, placing her hand on his. "You have to accept that you can't always save a patient. Not always. Many doctors struggle with this, yet it takes time to come to terms with it. But you have to keep working. People still need you while you're busy blaming yourself. That's what matters. When was the last time you took a vacation?" "What does it matter?" Dr. Brown responded indifferently. Jessica frowned. "Take at least a week's rest. You really need it now. Come to your senses. I can't let you fall into depression. It will affect your work. God forbid, you might even leave the profession, and that happens." "No way," Simon protested. "Maybe you're right about vacation. I'll head to the mountains. It's always easier to clear my mind there." In his younger years, Simon Brown often went hiking. It was perhaps the only thing he eagerly anticipated on weekends. Alone in nature, he quickly found his strength and composure. Jessica didn't merely suggest a vacation. She knew exactly what he needed. "That's it. Take the next couple of days off. I expect you back to work in a week. Go home now and rest." "What about the family?" "I'll speak to them myself. It's a sensitive issue." He was a difficult man. "We're trying to reach his wife, but she's not answering her phone. As far as I know, she's out of town." "I can't even begin to imagine her reaction when she finds out her husband is gone." "Let's not worry about that now, all right? I'll call you a cab. It's not safe for you to drive in your current state." The week flew by, and Simon had nearly recovered his emotional health, finding solace in the mountains. Simon had his own secluded routes that few others knew. When he returned from his hike, he barely dwelled on the past events. The next day he returned to work. There were no surgeries scheduled, so he saw a few in his office. Around noon, Jessica summoned him. As he walked to the head doctor's office, death preoccupied his thoughts. Why? Why do some people have a happy fate and others have to fight for the right to live? Why did I choose this profession? Am I so vain that I dare to entrust myself with the right to fight death? I'm just a human being. No, I shouldn't think that way. If it weren't for people like me, the world would have been in chaos long ago. Maybe Jessica's right. It's no good beating yourself up over the inevitable. It's impossible to save everyone. What's the point of giving up now? I can save hundreds more lives. Dr. Brown stood before the door of Dr. Fayle's office, feeling a sense of apprehension. "Dr. Fayle," he said as he looked inside. "You called?" "Yes, come in," Jessica responded from her desk, appearing drained. Her usual confidence was absent, replaced by the vulnerability of a woman who had recently wept. Her eyes were red. "What's wrong?" he asked, worried. "Simon," the woman sighed. "I had a very heavy conversation this morning. Mrs. Noboa came to visit." The surname Noboa cut through Simon's hearing. "Has she just arrived today?" he wondered. "He passed away a week ago." "She was out of the country. I had to listen to a lot of things." "Why didn't you call me?" "I wanted to speak with her first myself, to gauge her reaction to her husband's death. But this woman, she's demanding that I fire you." "Why on earth would she do that?" Simon was indignant. "You yourself said that I am not at fault in what happened." We all realise that, Simon. But what? I want to talk to her. How can I find her? It doesn't make sense. You see, Mr. Noboa was not an ordinary man. His wife would do anything to ruin your career. I've explained everything to her, but the woman is adamant. She's convinced he could have been saved. You know, it's very difficult to prove otherwise in these situations. There was no medical error. I did everything I could. This man's case was neglected. Had he sought help earlier, it might have been possible to remedy his situation. Look, I'm on your side, but you know that those in power have the upper hand. This woman has connections in the Ministry of Health. She's determined to see this through. If I don't let you go now, we'll all be in trouble, including me. I can't take that risk. You understand that? I'll take this to court. It's absurd to accuse me of incompetence when they've brought this on themselves. That's your right. But for now, I'm sorry, but I have to give in to her. I have no other option. Simon, try to understand my position. I thought you were stronger. Simon grimaced. What does it matter if she has connections? We have the truth on our side. Unfortunately, we live in a bureaucratic world. Whoever gets to the lawyers first is considered right. What's the issue then? Why don't I hire a lawyer right now? Listen, Simon, from my experience, there's not much chance of that working out. You have the right to sue for wrongful termination. I'll be happy to take you back. But the thing to do now is... I don't want any trouble. To hell with all of you. Do whatever you want. Am I free? Yes, Jessica replied, her gaze blunting. You can go now. Don't come to work from tomorrow. I'm sorry. I hope everything works out. Simon stormed out of her office, slamming the door. What audacity! He seethed. I've devoted so many years to this case just for some arrogant woman to disregard all my efforts. Of course I'm going to court. I don't care who she's connected to. I'm sure it's not my fault. The worst part is that because of one inevitable death, hundreds more that could have been avoided may occur. Simon didn't even bother to gather his belongings. He simply left his office without a word to anyone. The news of their lead surgeon's dismissal was bound to cause a huge outcry. Despite his critics, most of the staff loved Dr. Brown and held him in high regard. Simon didn't want to explain anything to anyone. He bid his usual farewell to his colleagues and the receptionists, got into his parked car, and took a deep breath. He was overcome by a strong desire to smoke. Dr. Brown hadn't smoked in about 7 years, having quit this bad habit after his breakup with Jessica. But now a clear urge surfaced from his subconscious. Simon left the parking lot and drove to the nearest shop. He bought a pack of cigarettes, sat in the car, and inhaled with pleasure. The long-awaited calm lasted for a split second, but with each puff it moved further away. Tossing away the cigarette butt, Simon drove home. His mind was in disarray. He drove automatically, blending into the obedient flow of cars. I should at least buy some groceries, he muttered aloud. The supermarket was a short distance from his house. Simon parked in his driveway and opted to walk to the store. He moved aimlessly, not noticing anyone around him. At the supermarket, he mechanically filled his cart without even looking at the products. When the checkout process revealed 4 bags of groceries, he was taken aback. However, he decided not to return any items. Simon strolled out of the store and lazily walked home. "Sir?" a voice echoed from afar. Simon didn't immediately realize that he was the one being addressed. "Sir?" the call was repeated. This time Simon turned his head towards the source of the sound. A few steps away from him stood a woman in worn-out clothes, holding the hand of a 6-year-old girl. "I apologize for the disturbance," she began. "What can I do for you?" Simon responded. The heavy bags dug into his palms. All he wanted now was to get home and rid himself of this load. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman mumbled, "but could you spare some change? My daughter is starving." To emphasize her words, the girl whimpered. Her thin body and the shadows under her eyes were clear signs of malnutrition. The mother didn't look any better. Simon knew that beggars often exploited others' pity by pretending to be unfortunate. He studied the couple. Either they were incredible actors, or they genuinely needed help. He didn't have any cash to give, because he didn't carry any with him. "I don't have any money," he said curtly, "but would you like some groceries? I have more than I need." The woman's eyes lit up. Simon thought she didn't seem to be lying. He handed her 2 hefty bags. "Here you go. I can't recall exactly what's inside, but it should be enough for a few meals. You can prepare it when you get home." "Thank you so much." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. "People are so indifferent these days. They don't care about others' misfortune. I've always been too proud to beg, but I have no choice. I can't stand to see my daughter hungry. I don't mind for myself." "What happened to you?" Simon suddenly asked. Although he didn't initially intend to converse with her, something inside him stirred. He couldn't ignore another person's hardship. "Why do you ask?" The woman seemed taken aback. "Life happens. I can't tell you everything. Thanks for the groceries. We'll be on our way." "Wait," Simon called out to the leaving woman. "I can see you're having a tough time. If there's any way I can help, tell me. I'm in a difficult situation myself, and I know what it's like when things don't go according to plan." "How can I ask a stranger for help?" the woman despaired. "Groceries are one thing, but this is already too much." "Wait a minute. My offer to assist is different. If you're really struggling, it's better not to decline. I might be able to solve your problem." "Well," the woman began, shifting from foot to foot, "Olivia and I have nowhere to go. We've been living on the street for 2 weeks now." Simon looked again at the mother and daughter. The woman, although dressed in dirty clothes, did not seem to drink. She seemed respectable, and her speech was coherent. She didn't appear to be drunk. The girl was quiet, scared, with wide eyes. "Okay," Simon looked around. "Let's do this. I live next door, just a few steps away. I have a spare room. We'll come right over. You can tell me everything. You can stay with me for a while until you decide." "What do you mean?" The woman rounded her eyes, puzzled by the proposal. "You don't know us at all, and neither do we know you." "We're in the same position, actually. Don't be frightened. There's a concierge in the building who won't stay silent if anything happens. Don't be afraid, please. I just can't leave you and your daughter outside. You probably haven't had hot food for days, have you?" "I don't know." The woman was still confused. "You can eat, wash up, get your clothes in order. You can leave later if you'd like, but at least my conscience will be clear." "All right." The woman hesitated, but eventually agreed. "My name is Paige, by the way, and my daughter's name is Olivia." "Simon Brown." The man introduced himself. "You can just call me Simon." Simon was busy in the kitchen, while Paige and her daughter cleaned up themselves in the bathroom. "I wonder what Mum would say if she stopped by to see me," Simon thought. "Would she scold me for being over-sentimental? No, I think she would be worried. She wouldn't ignore strangers distressed." By the time Simon's guests appeared in the kitchen, the man had already prepared the roast. Paige and her daughter had changed into his T-shirts and sports tights that Simon had provided. Simon was surprised to see how the clothes transformed them. Paige looked much younger than he had initially thought, a woman around 30 years old with long blonde hair and large grey eyes. Her daughter was a miniature version of her. The only indication of their hardship was their thinness, a sign that they hadn't eaten properly in a while. Without hesitation, Simon invited them to the table. "Well," he said, slightly embarrassed, "enjoy your meal. I hope my cooking doesn't disappoint you. I've prepared a roast. Just remember to eat slowly to avoid a stomachache." Paige and her daughter Olivia began eating. Olivia was initially shy, but reassured by her mother, she started eating. After dinner, Simon served tea, and Paige gradually became more comfortable, even showing a hint of a blush on her cheeks. "Olivia," Simon said to the girl, "maybe you want to watch cartoons?" "Yes," the girl answered uncertainly, looking at her mother, who nodded in response. Simon turned on the TV in the living room and seated the little girl on the sofa. Left alone with Paige in the kitchen, he began to question her. "Tell me, Paige, what's going on with you?" he asked. Paige remained silent for a while, gathering her thoughts. Eventually she composed herself and spoke. "I couldn't bear it any more. I took Olivia, some money, and just left. I didn't care where I was heading at that moment. All I knew was that I wanted to escape that awful place." "Awful place?" Simon queried, picturing some kind of horrific chamber. "Yes, my home. You see, my husband is not just a tyrant. He's worse. Yet Olivia and I have no one but him. I've tolerated his abuse for far too long, but I've reached my limit," the woman said, tears streaming down her face. "Was it really that bad? Did he hit you?" Simon asked. Paige nodded, taking a few more minutes to regain her composure before she could continue. "I married Esteban when I was very young, not even 20. My parents had died in an accident and I was all alone. Esteban seemed like a real hero. He wooed me beautifully and carried me in his arms. We married just 3 months after meeting. I saw no reason to refuse him. I thought I was in love. We lived comfortably since Esteban worked at a bank and earned well, but he didn't allow me to work. He believed a woman's role was to manage the household and raise children. I didn't protest much, although even then I should have thought about what kind of man he was. Until Olivia was born, he never showed this side of himself. Occasionally he would lose his temper, quarrel with me and forbid me from leaving the house. I had to cut ties with all my friends. For 5 years I was unable to become pregnant, which enraged Esteban. He accused me of being infertile and called me a failed woman. Then suddenly I discovered I was going to be a mother. I don't know how it happened. I hadn't undergone any special examinations. It seemed like a miracle from God. Throughout my pregnancy, Esteban was radiant with joy, longing for a son. He didn't allow me to discover the baby's gender in advance. He simply believed. But then... "And then a girl was born," Simon sighed. "Yes," Paige agreed. "And from that moment, he changed drastically. He resented me, and while he never loved Olivia, he tried not to show it, especially around his parents and friends. He provided for her, never denying her anything, but he lacked a father's affection. His treatment of me also changed. Before, Esteban might have been curt or ignored me for half a day, but after Olivia's birth, he became physically abusive. It began with a slap. If I raised my voice, he would immediately retaliate. I endured it, but it gradually got worse. One day, Esteban came home intoxicated. I went to the bedroom to avoid his advances. When he entered, I feigned sleep, but he was not appeased. He tried to wake me up and began to harass me. I refused, and he assaulted me severely. The pain was excruciating. I screamed, waking up Olivia, and the neighbours even started knocking on the door. Blood was everywhere, but Esteban, with his connections, quickly silenced the incident and threatened to kill me if I reported it to the police. Regrettably, I listened to him out of fear. How could I tell the police that my husband was abusing me? Many women in our country live in similar situations. Over time, this abusive behaviour from Esteban became systematic. He often returned home drunk from work and the beatings were inevitable. I felt trapped, too scared to go to the police. Did he hurt you every day? No, not every day. When he returned sober, he acted as if nothing had happened, even showed me some affection and took me to various places. He hurt so the marks could be hidden. He knew that visible signs of abuse would attract unwanted attention. His parents and friends often visited. And his parents, weren't they aware? When I confided in my mother-in-law, she laughed. She asked me not to speak ill of her son, and when I showed her my bruises, she accused me of being unfaithful and trying to play the victim. But I've only ever been with Esteban. My father-in-law, he felt sorry for me, but said a wife must endure. Can you believe that? Paige sobbed. Remembering it clearly pained her. For almost 6 years I lived in torment. Esteban's abuse escalated. When our daughter Olivia was taken to her grandparents, he kept me captive all weekend. I won't provide all the details. It was relentless. The last incident was the worst. I required medical attention, but he wouldn't let me leave. When he saw me bleeding, he finally called an ambulance. I was experiencing a miscarriage. I pleaded with the doctor not to inform my husband. Seeing my bruises and scrapes, the doctor encouraged me to report to the police, but I insisted that I'd fallen from a stepladder. We were renovating a room at home, so it seemed plausible. The doctor was doubtful, but he couldn't intervene without my agreement. He did agree not to reveal my miscarriage to Esteban. I was sure that if Esteban found out, it would have been the end of me, no matter his guilt. When I was discharged from the hospital, he was at home, not even bothering to meet me. My biggest worry was for Olivia, but thank goodness she was with her grandparents. Then, something unexpected happened. I hesitate to call it a miracle. Esteban had a business trip. This was rare, as he seldom attended conferences or seminars. The trip was for 2 weeks, and I realized it was my opportunity. I had to escape. The constant fear and pain had become unbearable. But where could I go? He only gave me money for groceries. I'd managed to save a little, but it was too little. As soon as he left, I packed. Telling anyone was too risky. I had no family or friends. I asked my father-in-law for money, supposedly for Olivia's necessities. I think he understood. He was the only one who attempted to assist me. He had spent his life under his wife's control, terrified to oppose her, but I couldn't judge him. I was in the same situation. So, what was the next? Where did you go? Well, I didn't really go anywhere. I rented a cheap room in a different neighbourhood, far from our old apartment. I considered finding a job, but with Olivia in my arms, I couldn't get her anywhere. I was unable to afford daycare or a nanny. In 3 months, I had exhausted my savings. If I were alone, I might have survived. I did have a small part-time job mopping floors in the evenings. Simon glanced at the frail woman. It was clear that she was unaccustomed to hard labour. He assumed the decision to take such a low-paying job must have been difficult for her. I have no education or experience. Where else could I go? I was terrified Esteban would find us. I used to study before marriage, but stopped when my parents passed away. Esteban didn't allow me to continue. I was stuck at home. Now, at 31, I'm living in constant fear with a baby in my arms. I understand your fear and circumstances. We can find a solution, I assured her. But how did you end up on the streets? How long has this been going on? We lived in a room for 3 months. When our money depleted, I persuaded the landlady to lend us some. But she eventually lost patience and we ended up on the streets. I tried to go to a rehab centre, but feared Esteban would discover us. We've been wandering since. I had to quit my job because there was no way to care for Olivia. Eventually I was forced to beg. I felt it was the end, but I clung to the hope of a miracle. And then it happened. Paige tried to smile, but broke down in tears. Simon wrapped his arm around her shoulders, comforting her. Paige, I can't promise anything, but I may be able to help. You can stay with me for now. Once you settle in, I can connect you with a friend who runs a private clinic. You could start working there as an administrator. It's not much, but it's a start, and we can figure the rest out together. Really? Paige's eyes were wide, with a mixture of joy and doubt. I'll do all the housework. I don't want you to see me as a slacker. Calm down. No one's forcing you to do anything. And you'll have to divorce your husband because you have a small child. The courts will need to be involved. He'll take Olivia. Do you understand? He won't let her stay with me. I'm jobless and homeless. He has money, a home and influence. Don't worry. We can figure it out. I know a few influential people, including some good lawyers, even a judge and a couple of prosecutors. Do you work in law enforcement? No, far from it. I was a surgeon until today. What do you mean? Paige asked, surprised. I was laid off today. A patient died during surgery, and while it wasn't my fault, the patient's family thinks otherwise. He was a difficult case. I'm not sure what to do now, but I won't let it go. For now, I've had to concede to the head doctor. I'll file a lawsuit. It's all I can do. I need some time to clear my head. Simon and Paige sat in the kitchen for a while, talking. Afterwards, Paige went to bed. Olivia was already dozing off in front of the television. Paige gently picked up the girl and carried her into the bedroom. What are you saying? Simon's mother's voice was extremely agitated. How did they fire you? How dare they? They won't find a specialist like you easily. Mum, I don't want to discuss this over the phone. Then come over. You have spare time now and I need help. I'm redoing the flower bed and it's hard to dig alone. Will you come? Simon thought of Paige and Olivia. It was potentially risky to leave a stranger in his apartment. However, he couldn't refuse his mother. Okay, I'll be there tonight, in the evening. I need to finish up some things. I'll be waiting, Sonny. Just don't do anything rash. Mum, please. All right, see you later. Simon ended the call. He had just woken up. The conversation with his mother had finally woken him up. I have to go. I'll trust in Paige's decency. I believe she is not the type to repay kindness with cruelty. Simon stepped into the kitchen and was surprised to see Paige already busy with household chores. She had managed to clean up and prepare breakfast, with a cup of coffee already steaming on the table. I heard that you woke up and decided to make a cup of coffee quickly. I hope you don't mind me taking charge of your kitchen, she asked. No, not at all, Simon smiled. Make yourself at home. Honestly, I didn't expect you to make breakfast. Why wouldn't I? I've been doing this for years, but this is the first time it's brought me pleasure. I hope you eat scrambled eggs. Simon looked at the table in astonishment. Paige had prepared more than just scrambled eggs. A large stack of cheesecakes was on the plate, something he hadn't seen since his childhood. Wow, cheesecakes! It's been ages since I last had them, just like the ones my dad used to make. When he left, I was still a kid and never saw them again. They were his speciality. After the divorce, my mum cut off all ties with my dad, and cheesecakes became a taboo, said Simon, as he eagerly devoured the food on his plate. I got the recipe from my father too. Some men have the same weaknesses. Dad used to make this dish a lot, and that's how I learned, she said. What a coincidence. Where's Olivia? Hasn't she woken up yet? He asked. She's been up for a while. I gave her a pencil and paper so she's drawing. She really enjoys it, she replied. We should get her some art supplies. I'm heading to the centre now so I can look for something, Simon suggested. That's great. Paige exclaimed, genuinely excited. "Do you need anything? We could go together," he offered. The woman looked embarrassed. Simon realized that she didn't want to leave the house unnecessarily. "Okay, I understand. It's not a problem. Just tell me what you need and I'll bring it. I'm not well stocked with women's items, as you can see," he reassured her. "I don't need anything, thank you," she replied modestly. "Don't be shy," Simon shook his head. "I'm not shy," Paige blushed. "I just don't know what I need. Your house is so well equipped. I think you have everything." "Actually, Paige, I have to leave for 3 days. I'm going to visit my mum. She lives in the country." The man started suddenly, finally deciding to tell the woman about his departure. "Will you be okay without me? I can buy groceries, and if you need anything else, order it for home delivery. I'll leave you my card." "Why?" Paige asked, frightened. "Are you going to leave us alone in the apartment? You don't know me at all. What if something happens?" "Like what? A worldwide flood?" "Just go down to the concierge. She's got all the emergency numbers. I'll tell her my sister's here with my niece. You can take Olivia out in the yard. The girl needs fresh air. Our yard is closed. There are no strangers here. I'll show you around when I get back." "Okay." Paige stood at the stove, completely confused. She had never expected that this wonderful man would show her trust. Simon arrived in the village in the evening. It was not far from the town, but the roads were jammed with cars. His mother met him in the garden. The Browns' cottage was nestled in a picturesque location, surrounded by a forest on 2 sides. Simon cherished the pine trees that imbued the air with a rich aroma of resin and needles. The property also included a small vegetable garden. However, the pride of Michaela wasn't the vegetable beds, but the vibrant flower beds, abundant in hundreds of shades. The neighbours suspected that Michaela possessed some secret to her luxurious flower beds, yet she insisted that love was her only fertilizer. Simon admired his mother, a woman who had gracefully crossed her 7th decade. Her age did not hamper her from maintaining an active lifestyle and looking great. After his father left, she single-handedly raised a 7-year-old Simon, juggling household chores, work and self-care. Although the responsibility was immense, she did not view it as a burden. Instead, physical labour was her refuge, helping her divert her thoughts from her former husband, Gilbert, whom she had loved deeply. One day, when little Simon had just started 1st grade, Gilbert came home from work and began packing. Michaela thought her husband was leaving for a business trip, but he took her hand, looked into her eyes, and confessed his love for another woman. Michaela felt as though the room was spinning, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. Gilbert spoke more, but his words didn't register. It wasn't until the door closed behind him that reality set in. At first, Michaela tried to win him back. She even found out where Gilbert was living now and saw the woman he was with. They seemed happy together, and it was then that Michaela realized her husband wasn't coming back. She didn't cause a scene, but simply removed him from her life. One day, Gilbert came to see his son. Michaela told him everything she had thought about him and asked him not to visit again. Since he had chosen a different life, she asked him to leave their old life behind. Gilbert understood, and Simon never saw his father after that. When Simon was an adult, he learned of his father's death, though no details were given. He didn't grieve much, as he barely remembered Gilbert. His mother had convinced him that Gilbert was not worthy of being called a father. "Simon!" Michaela exclaimed. "I'm so glad to see you. How are you? Come inside quickly. Tell me what's been happening." "Mum, I don't want to explain everything. Honestly, it's a bad situation. I'm going to sue," Simon told his mother, who listened in silence, occasionally shaking her head. "And Jessica, how could she let this happen? I just don't understand." "Mum, it's not your problem." "How could it not be my problem?" Michaela threw up her hands. "You're my son. I know how hard you've worked, and now your life's work is ruined." It's dishonourable." "What honour are you talking about? In this world it's all about money and connections. If that's the case, then I won't give up either. And I have these connections. I've helped more than one powerful man. I think a lot of them would be happy to help me." "That's right. You should rest now, then get back to work. I wish you'd sort out your personal life." "Mum," Simon looked at her sternly, "how many times have we talked about this? Family's not for me. Just because I'm jobless now doesn't mean I should consider it. It's temporary." "I just want grandchildren," his mother sighed. "I'm not getting any younger. Time is running out. I won't be able to babysit forever." "Don't be sad." Simon hugged his mother. "Grandchildren aren't everything in that life. Look at you. This year's flower beds are beyond praise. The neighbours are probably all envious. They're likely saying you've sold your soul again." "Oh, don't tell me. I want more. I want to work on that plot." The woman vaguely gestured. "Will you help me dig over there? And I just need to tear down the old barn. It's spoiling the view." "That's what I came for," laughed Simon. "Just give me a crowbar and a shovel. I'll start right away." "You're crazy. It's night time. We'll start in the morning. I'll feed you some pies. Your favourite, with green onions." They settled down in the patio. Simon listened to the chirping of the crickets and admired the sunset sky. "It's good here," he thought. "Maybe I should give up everything, move to the village and go into farming. I've saved enough money. I don't need that much on my own. As for medicine, what can I do if material principles come before moral ones? I'll never accept that." "Mum," he said suddenly. "What, sonny?" Michaela seemed to have dozed off. "I have something to tell you." His mother squinted. "I don't like your tone." "Anyway," Simon began, "I was coming home from work yesterday, completely shattered, and I met a woman and her child. They looked lost and hungry, so I gave them 2 bags of groceries." "That's right, son. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good deed." "That's not all. They're going to stay with me for a while." "What?" The mother looked at her son confused. "What do you mean, they're staying with you?" "Mum, Paige and Olivia are in a very difficult situation. They have nowhere to go. I just couldn't leave them in trouble." Simon recounted to his mother everything Paige had told him. The woman was taken aback. "Simon, how could you leave complete strangers alone in your apartment? You have valuables and electronics there." "They won't take anything. The girls are scared to death. All they need now is a warm corner. I want to help Paige get a job. I don't know why, but I trust her." "I don't know, son. What if she's a professional con artist?" "Yeah, think about it. How many people are going to let her into their house like this? It's a dubious scheme. You could wait your whole life." "No, she's telling the truth. You should have seen them. Olivia's almost transparent. A girl her age needs to eat well. If I can help them, it's my duty. I've spent my life saving people with my hands. Why can't I do it with my heart?" Michaela looked at her son for a long time. Doubt was evident in her eyes, but she was still proud to have raised such a man. "Trust, but verify," she finally said. "When you get back, try to find out something about this woman." 3 days passed quickly. Simon had completed all the necessary work at the summer house and was returning to the city. Michaela asked to accompany him, but he refused. He wanted to ensure that Paige met his expectations. "Mum, let me bring them here. Olivia will love it here. And Paige, she's not afraid of physical work. She'll help you with the chores." "Oh, son, I don't know." "Well, you've always been intelligent. I hope you're not mistaken this time. Bring them over. Let's see what kind of people they are." Simon was relieved that his mother had agreed. His mother was difficult to argue with, but regardless, she was a good person. After packing, he drove home. The journey was quick. Few people returned to the city on weekdays. Upon arriving at the house, The man studied the windows for quite some time. There was no sign of anyone inside, leading him to briefly wonder if Paige had escaped. The door was locked from the inside. He rang the bell. After a few seconds, Paige opened. She seemed happy. The look of fright was gone from her face. Her cheeks no longer seemed sunken. "Here I am," Simon announced as he stepped into the apartment. "How are you?" Olivia ran out to greet the man, stopping at the threshold to study him with her large, curious eyes. "Everything's fine," Paige replied with a smile. "We've been painting. Thank you so much for the paints. I've never seen Olivia so happy." "Really? Let's see your masterpieces then. I'll make some tea," said the man with a smile. "Let me handle that," Paige offered. "I've already prepared lunch, by the way." "Good," Simon exclaimed, sniffing the air appreciatively. "It smells delicious. I can't wait to eat." Olivia dashed off to her room and returned with a stack of drawings. As Paige set the table, the girl proudly showed Simon her artwork. To his surprise, Olivia's skills were quite advanced for a 6-year-old. "Paige, I think you should enroll your daughter in art school. She clearly has talent." "I'd love to, but—" Simon interrupted her. He turned to the young girl. "Olivia, do you want to learn to paint like true artists?" "Yes," she replied modestly. "Then I suggest you join an art school. It's a place where they teach you to draw. If you're interested, we can go and register tomorrow." Olivia looked at her mother, not saying a word. Her eyes sparkled, showing her interest in Simon's proposal. "But it must be very costly," Paige expressed her worry. "No more of that. Expensive or not, what does it matter? If a child has talent, it's worth nurturing so you won't regret it later. I'll cover all the costs. If it's too much for you, Paige, let's make a deal. You can repay me when you're able. Okay?" "Can I really do that?" the woman asked in surprise. "Everything is possible. You see, I live alone and have surplus money. I can afford to spend it on useful things." After having lunch, the man thanked Paige for the delicious meal. He noted to himself that she was an excellent cook. "I'm going to take a nap. I'm tired from the road, and I got up very early. If it suits you, we can go to my mum's summer house together soon. You'll like it there." "That probably wouldn't be very convenient," Paige replied, "especially since your mum is there." "My mum already knows about you. I told her everything." "Really? How did she react?" "She was probably mad at you for bringing beggars into the house." "Firstly, you're not beggars, but people in trouble. There's a big difference. Secondly, she scolded me, of course, but she got over it quickly. She understands everything. After all, she's the one who raised me, so many of her character traits have been passed on to me." "Then, of course, I agree. Olivia will probably like the countryside. She's never been outdoors. We went to the sea once, but my daughter was just a baby then and doesn't remember anything." "Well, all the more reason to go. I'll rest and then we can plan something." Simon retired to the bedroom. He fell asleep almost immediately, as the emotional strain had taken its toll. When the man awoke, the apartment was silent. He assumed Paige and Olivia were resting too. He quietly left the bedroom and, passing the living room, he noticed Paige sitting with her back to him, silently sobbing. Stealthily, Simon slipped into the room and observed the girl. She was crying on the sofa, clutching something in her hands. Simon coughed softly. Paige jumped, quickly wiping her eyes on her sweatshirt sleeve. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," Simon said. "No, it's okay. I was just lost in thought," she replied. "Why are you crying? What are you holding?" "This is a picture of my parents." Paige showed Simon an old, faded picture. "They had just gotten married in this photo. It's all I have left of them. When I fled from my husband's home, I only managed to grab my documents and this photo." Simon carefully accepted the glossy piece of cardboard. Two joyous individuals stared back at him from the worn picture. The man tenderly held the woman, whose eyes radiated happiness. Simon's breath hitched. "What's wrong?" Paige fretted, noticing the change in his expression. Are those your parents?" "Yes," nodded the woman. "And what were their names?" "My mum's name was Melissa, and my dad's name was Gilbert." "Oh, my goodness," Simon whispered, sinking heavily onto the couch. "Are you all right? You've gone so pale. Let me get you some water." Without waiting for an answer, Paige rushed from the room, returning seconds later with a glass of water. He drank it greedily and murmured, "Thank you." "You gave me such a fright. Do you have blood pressure issues?" My mother-in-law turned dramatically pale and collapsed once due to low blood pressure. "No, Paige, I don't have blood pressure issues. I just need a moment to digest this information." "What information?" the woman asked, surprised. "Did my parents embarrass you somehow?" Simon abruptly stood from the couch and headed to a large dresser. He opened the bottom drawer and pulled out two heavy velvet photo albums. These albums, popular in the past, were filled with carefully preserved family photos, capturing precious moments. The man frantically skimmed through the heavy cardboard pages. The picture he needed was nowhere to be found. Michaela had kept everything except that picture. Did she throw it away? Simon was nervous. No, it can't be. It must be here somewhere. Finally, among the blank pages, Simon found the picture. The card was about 35 years old. It was the last time the family had gone to the sea. Simon, with a trembling hand, picked up the black and white photograph by the corner. He stared at it for a long time. A smiling little boy with a sunburned nose, smeared with ice cream, looked at him from the picture. The boy sat on the lap of a mustachioed man with a stern look. Slowly, Brown turned to Paige and held out the photograph to her. Paige stared at the picture, perplexed. She knew this mustachioed man very well, and he only looked stern in the photo. In reality, her father was very kind and often laughed. How can that be? Paige looked at Simon. Where did you get a picture of my father? I don't understand. When was it taken? Almost 40 years ago. You weren't even born then, Simon sighed. My father's name was Gilbert too. No way! Paige jumped up from the couch, her body tense. It can't be. As you can see, it is. Simon's gaze drifted into the void. The man was struggling to organize his thoughts. It's just a coincidence. It's a common name, and in old pictures men often look alike. I realized it's the moustache. Paige. Simon stood up and took the woman's hands. You realize perfectly well that it's not the moustache. Both your father and my father are the same man. The woman's face reflected a whirlwind of emotions, too complex to describe. Overwhelmed, she broke down in tears. Simon held her close, gently stroking her blonde hair. The next day, he took Paige and Olivia to the summer house. The newly discovered siblings struggled to comprehend the situation. Neither had suspected the existence of a living relative. Struggling to find words, they both fell silent. I'll tell my mother myself, okay? I need to prepare her. Simon broke the silence. Of course, Paige nodded. I wouldn't dream of telling her outright. Olivia was still in the dark. It might be less shocking for the child if her uncle appeared unexpectedly, but for now Simon and Paige decided not to rush things. After all, too much had happened in the last week. Michaela was already waiting for them outside the house. She had seen her son's car approaching through the window and had come out to greet them. As the entire group exited the car, the woman looked incredulously at the guests. Mum, Simon excitedly called out to her. I didn't come alone, as promised. Meet Paige, and this charming young lady is Olivia. "Hello," Paige said modestly. Olivia also mumbled a greeting. Michaela's stern face softened into a smile at the sight of the girls. She adored children and couldn't resist their genuine simplicity. "Good afternoon, girls. I'm delighted to see you. Why are we standing outside? Let's go inside. I'll get dinner ready, as you must be tired and hungry from the journey." "I can help," offered Paige excitedly. "No, I can manage it myself." "Mum, it's impolite to refuse, especially since Paige is a fantastic cook. I was surprised myself, particularly with her breakfast cheesecakes." "Cheesecakes?" Mother responded with wariness. The mere mention of the dish seemed to stir up some unpleasant memories. "Yes," Simon replied with a smile. "You'd be surprised, but they're just like the ones my father used to make." Upon hearing that, Michaela grimaced. Even after so many years, she couldn't forgive her ex-husband for his betrayal. For her, there was nothing worse than such abandonment of the family. "Well, we're not making cheesecakes right now," the woman replied nonchalantly. "If you're so eager to help, please go to the kitchen, and you, Simon, show the girl the garden." "Well, Olivia," Brown winked at the little girl, "do you want to see the most beautiful flowers in the world?" "The prettiest?" The girl's eyes widened. "The prettiest there can be. Let's go." Together they walked into the garden. Olivia was filled with boundless delight. She dashed from one flower bed to another, breathing in the scent of the beautiful buds. "And there are also berries there," Simon said to the little girl. "Do you like berries? The raspberries are ripe." "I don't know," the girl shrugged uncertainly. "Don't tell me you've never eaten raspberries." "I have, but—" "But you've never tasted one like this." Simon walked over to the bushes, picking a handful of large red berries. He offered them to the little girl, who carefully took one berry and popped it into her mouth. Her eyes immediately lit up with delight. "Delicious! Can I have another one?" "Sure. Eat as many as you want. The entire garden is yours." Olivia laughed and ran towards the bushes. Her joy was so infectious that the man couldn't help but laugh. He settled down in a chaise longue and bathed his face in the sun. "Lunch is on the table," his mother called. Simon was startled out of his semi-slumber. Olivia was satiated with berries, her face smeared with red juice. "Oh, my God, look, you're all dirty. Let's hurry up and wash up, or Mum will get mad." Olivia obediently followed the man. He turned on the garden hose and she held up her hands, eagerly washing her face with the cool water. They both laughed. By the time they reached the kitchen, they were completely soaked. Michaela and Paige had already set the table. Boiled potatoes, sprinkled with green onions, were steaming, and next to them was a large dish piled high with appetizing fried chicken. "What a feast!" exclaimed Simon. "A true village celebration." "Paige's hands are golden," remarked Michaela. "You weren't exaggerating when you said she's a great cook. Thank you for bringing such a helper." These words were unusual, as Michaela was not typically quick to warm to others. It seemed Paige had found a way to win over the stern woman. Simon was pleased, especially as he anticipated a serious conversation ahead. After lunch, when Olivia was carried into the house for a nap, and Michaela had shown Paige her flowers, everyone settled in the arbour. Paige, unused to the fresh air, began to doze. Simon accompanied her into the house and placed her next to the sleeping Olivia. Back in the garden, he sat down next to his mother. "Mum," he began, trying to sound casual, "what do you think of the girls?" "They are really nice girls," exclaimed Michaela. "Honestly, I didn't expect this. I thought you'd bring home some unsavoury character, but Paige is so respectable, and her daughter is delightful. She's quiet and fascinated by everything. It's clear she hasn't been spoiled. I wish you had a wife and child like them. I would consider her my own granddaughter." That's what I wanted to discuss, Simon replied. Simon? His mother looked at him in surprise. Do you mean to say that you've fallen in love with Paige? It's only been a week. I was only joking. I have, Mum, but not in the way you imagine. What do you mean? Michaela asked, looking puzzled. Can you love a young woman in any other way? I've brought something. You should take a look. With these words, Simon pulled an envelope from his pocket and carefully took out a photograph. Here, take a look. You remember, don't you? Michaela accepted the card he offered. She inhaled sharply. Where did you find this? I thought I had thrown away all of Gilbert's pictures. I kept it at my place. After all, he's not only your husband, but also my father. Ex-husband, the woman corrected him. Yes, but not an ex-father, Simon countered. Mum, I know this conversation won't be particularly pleasant for you. Dad hurt you badly, and you've never been able to forgive him. But you must have found out how he lived. I can't believe your curiosity didn't override your pride. You're right, Simon. His mother sighed deeply. Despite everything, I have always loved your father. He hurt me deeply. I may have made a mistake by preventing your communication with him. He suffered greatly. I didn't even accept money from him, though I didn't live a very sweet life. Pride is to blame. I couldn't get rid of it. I know he found happiness with his Melissa. I had no choice but to accept it. What was the point of creating drama, threatening him, or tricking him into coming back? It wouldn't have brought us happiness. Then they had a daughter, so I decided to distance myself and make sure you did the same. And then the accident. I didn't even tell you. Gilbert and his wife were returning from a holiday when it happened. Their neighbour informed me about it. I attended the funeral. You didn't even tell me. What was there to tell? How a drunken man drove his car into them? There's no point in discussing it now. I made many mistakes, I know. But I had the right to know. He was my father, after all. Gilbert died on the spot, continued Michaela, sighing. They tried to resuscitate Melissa, but it was unsuccessful. She was actually operated on in your hospital, but you had just started working there at that time. I don't even know who the surgeon was. She didn't survive. They had a daughter. I don't know where she is now. She's about 10 years younger than you. I only caught a glimpse of her at the funeral. She's blonde, ashy, like your Paige. She looks just like her. Mum, Simon gathered his thoughts. Paige is my half-sister. What? Michaela reacted with surprise. That can't be. She does look similar, but you shouldn't draw such a conclusion just from my story. Where did you even get that idea? Simon took the second photograph out of the envelope and handed it to his mother. This is the picture I saw in Paige's hands when I got home. Those are her parents. I was shocked at first when I saw my father, but then I showed her this photo. You're telling me that... Yes, there's no doubt about it. Paige is my father's and his second wife's daughter. Therefore, she's my half-sister. But that's unbelievable. Do you realize how slim your chances of meeting were? Especially under the circumstances you described? There are no coincidences, Mum. Simon hugged her. Apparently, someone from above decided that the family should be together. They've suffered enough. Everything will be all right now. We must wake her up immediately. Olivia is like my granddaughter, isn't she? Granddaughter, Mum, just as you wanted. But there's no need to wake her up. We'll do it when it's time. Michaela hugged her son and looked through the windows of her old summer house, where mother and daughter were now peacefully sleeping. A blissful smile played on her face.